that kind of internalization that our lights were off in San Francisco because of an outage in the cloud in the east coast of the country,
Yeah.
that just tells you how much dependencies you built in. So when something breaks, you don't have any idea about what the ripple effect would be.
What are you doing to stay on top, to stay ahead of the curve as an innovation house?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think one of the things that we've always done well is we focused on the problem to solve, and the problem itself also evolves, right? And we've actually tried always to come up with clean slate, whiteboard solutions versus starting with what a competitor may or may not be doing. And so even when we started in the early days and producing this vision of we want to make the internet look like it's your own network, which was a grand vision, a lot of people kept telling us like, oh, you need to do what company X is doing, and our response was, company X is solving an older problem, we're trying to solve the new problem, so we don't really care about what company X is doing, we care about who's solving this problem more than anything else. So when it comes to the Thousand Eyes vision and how we're thinking about things, there's really two or three elements to it. The first is the data. We're all about building the best view of connected environments end to end. And so we keep focusing on where there might be gaps for us in the data, and we want to find a way to conquer that gap. And this is one of the areas where the Cisco acquisition has been great, because we have been able to deploy ThousandEyes on Cisco infrastructure that allows us to like now collect data from some of the most remote parts, like areas which would never be able to go and physically collect, install ThousandEyes and all of that. So it starts with the data, is the quality of data. The other area that we've been innovating on is once we have this immense, really powerful data set, how do we draw insights that are not obvious? And so there's a whole lot of innovation going on insights. We've actually done a bit of work. This was another incubation inside Cisco that we've brought inside ThousandEyes around being able to predict certain kinds of outages and disruptions in companies that are using internet. So that's sort of making sense of the data is really critical.
Yeah.
And on one thing that I've been really passionate about, Gareth, is I think one of the philosophical differences Thousand Eyes has come up with when we started the company was usually if you look at people who do network monitoring, and by the way, if you talk to anybody in the network side, like anytime there's an issue, it's always the network. Like they get blamed no matter what, right? And if you looked at companies that have done network monitoring, the approach has been more around enforcing an SLA, a service level agreement, or like it's more sort of, hey, it's not me. But what happens when there is an outage in an organization is there are different teams that get together, application, network, infrastructure, and they all come into a war room with this whole objective of proving it's not them. And so you think about like if I have a broken glass in my house, my
Yeah.
kids first come up and say it's not
It
me.
wasn't me.
It wasn't me. That's the only thing. So I can't actually know who did it, right? And what we've taken is a philosophical different approach of we really want to help people collaborate with each other.
Yeah.
And what's fundamentally changed is 5 years ago, when you had an outage, you would have mostly internal teams trying to resolve that outage together.
Sure.
Now, when you have an outage, you have to rely on somebody from potentially Amazon, somebody from British Telecom or AT&T, somebody from Salesforce. So like it is like a completely different ecosystem of dependencies,
Sure.
and it's really difficult to like make that happen. And I'll give you an example of how interconnected the world is, right? So in our first
Please
office
do.
in San Francisco, we were five individuals in our first actual office in a high rise in San Francisco, and at 7 p.m. they would turn off the lights. 7 p.m. lights are off, and you had to pick up a phone like a landline connected on the wall and dial a number and enter a code to turn the lights back on. This was to conserve energy, which made sense. So
Yeah.
for a week or so, I was doing that every day at 7 as the lights would go off because we were working till late night. And then my co-founder Ricardo said, "This is stupid. We're not going to keep doing this manually. I'm going to write a script and I'm going to automate the whole thing." So he wrote code, and the code was using a company called Twilio, which is a public company, and they automate interactions with phone systems and so on, which is really cool tech. So we used their APIs and their technology to write a script to run at 6:59 and just keep the lights on, which is brilliant. Until a week later, the lights go off, and when the lights went off, any normal individual would have stood up and dial the code and turn the lights back on, but we were in the dark trying to debug why the script is not working. And after 15 minutes of typing and trying to figure out, we realized that our script was fine, but Twilio was having an issue, and it was because of an outage that had happened due to a storm in the east coast of an Amazon data center. So
Right.
just that kind of internalization that our lights were off in San Francisco because of an outage in the cloud in the east coast of the country.
Yeah.
That just tells you how much dependencies you built in. Like it's super easy to write code these days with a lot of API calls and so on compared to
Sure.
what it was many years ago. But it also introduces unknown dependencies. And so when something breaks, you don't have any idea about what the ripple effect would be. Like it just can take down systems altogether.
Sure. And that is the danger of cloud based services, I suppose, isn't it? But I didn't think that it would dictate lighting, but you know, I've never heard
Well,
of that before, but I'm sure it's really common. I just didn't come across that before.
it's
But
automation, right? Like it's the
yeah,
use of
sure.
automation. You can automate the process of turning your lights on and off, and it's through an API call. But if the hosting of the API call is gone, your lights don't work. Like it's
So outside of the connectivity world, what tech innovation are you most excited about? What are you interested in? What do you have your eye on at the moment, which excites you?
yeah. I think the whole the connected cars ecosystem is pretty interesting. I think that's probably one thing that I find very fascinating is how transportation can change with cars that just have more tech in them
Yeah,
and going towards full self-driving automation and whatever you call it, but also the ability for these cars to communicate with each other, because this is one thing that hasn't happened as much in the past, and the ability for potentially these cars to or these vehicles to communicate with each other, things that are changing how public transportation works with just more tech coming into it. I think that's an area that is really fascinating, and I've had firsthand experience with Tesla and how upgrades are sent to the car and how the
yeah,
car's form changes, like overnight sitting in the garage. It starts to do different things tomorrow when it wakes up. I find that's really fascinating, and that's also fascinating to me because it still connects back to like internet and all of the stuff
sure.
that I'm passionate about to
Absolutely.
begin with. I think that's definitely an area that I feel is evolving rapidly, and I think the impact of this can be quite interesting when it comes to populated countries where more efficiencies can be driven if you have the right sort of technology and public transportation and all that come together. So